stadium entirely.
You're listening to the Baumbastic Podcast with Andrew Ellis on Inside Arkansas.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Baumbastic Podcast, presented by Inside Arkansas, hosted by the brilliant and talented and handsome Andrew Ellis. This is the #1 podcast on the planet for all things Razorback baseball. One could argue one of the #1 podcasts in the world for anything at all. Golden Globe nominee podcast. This is a big deal here. This is our little spinoff edition show called Calling All Casuals, where we invite those casual baseball fans who just want to learn a little bit about this Razorback team, maybe want to get caught up to speed on some of these new guys because they don't have time to keep up throughout the entire offseason. Maybe they've been focused on football, which I hope not. Maybe they've been focused on basketball, which is understandable. But no matter what, whether you're a casual or a diehard, you're welcome here on the show. And so happy to be here with you guys on a Wednesday afternoon edition. New start time for this. You may notice that it is 3 p.m. and not 6 p.m. Thought this would be a little bit better to do because this allows me to go as long as I want. Last week I was a little bit nervous, didn't know if anybody was going to show up, didn't know how long it was going to go, and I kind of felt rushed and didn't really like that. My goal for this now, because we're going to keep doing these every single week, and we're going to try to do them mostly Wednesdays, but there are going to be some weeks where the basketball team plays on Wednesday, and so we'll have to adjust a little bit. But we're going to try to do these 3 p.m. midweek no matter what. My goal is that if you're working in an office, working in a cubicle, whatever, this is where you run out the clock on your work week or your work day. Sometimes, everybody says you got to run that QB kneel at the end of work. And, sometimes you might go to the bathroom at 4:30, run out the clock there. We're just going to be here on the Baumbastic Podcast. You just run the stretch play, run the draw, little dive between the tackles. We're just killing the clock. We'll keep our first team offense out there, but there's no doubt about it. We're day, and the Baumbastic Podcast is here to do that. So this is a live chat edition. So again, appreciate everybody for being here, whether it's 10 of y'all, whether it's 1,000 of y'all. We're going to keep this thing rolling. Get those questions, comments in the chat, and we will get to them, and we'll go as long as you guys want to. If you guys want to talk about starting lineup, want to talk about the bullpen, the rotation, Kahio Eloy's defense, anything Dave had to say today, whatever the case may be, we're here to talk about it, and there are no stupid questions. If you just want to ask, what is a bunt? What is a balk? Don't ask me what a balk is because I don't think I can tell you that. But we're going to break it all down here on the show. Before we get started, I do want to tell you guys about one of our top sponsors here on Inside Arkansas, OZK Insurance. Are you tired of juggling insurance companies just to find the right coverage? At OZK Insurance in Rogers, they make sure insurance is simple again. As a 100% independent agency, they shop the entire marketplace to deliver the best combination of cost and coverage, saving you both time and money. Whether it's home, auto, boat, motorcycle, life, or commercial insurance, their friendly team has access to a wide range of flexible options designed just for you. They serve Northwest and Central Arkansas, Bentonville, Hot Springs, Centerton, Fayetteville, Little Rock, Springdale, and beyond. Let OZK Insurance be the trusted advisor you never knew you needed. And don't just take my word for it. Take this over 600 5-star Google reviews, their word for it. Start today with a free online quote at ozkinsurance.com or call 479-715-4200. You can also check out their brand new mobile app in the Google Play or App Store, wherever you get your apps. It's OZK Insurance. It is protection made simple. So before we get to you guys' comments, because we'll see how many we end up having, but we'll get to all of them. But before we get to those, did want to just refresh you guys on a few things that we talked to Dave Van Horn about this morning. He did a press conference about 10 a.m. And once you get to this point, honestly, we talked to Dave at some of the scrimmages. We talked to him at Swatters Club. He did a press conference previewing practice a few weeks ago. There's all these different events. Some people get invited to cool exclusive VIP events where you get to hang out with Dave and show him your engagement pictures. So we've been talking to Dave a lot, and I feel like every time we talk to him, it's about the same kinds of things. Hey, what's going on with this rotation? What's it going to look like? Who's starting in left field? Are you going to be able to survive with Kahio Eloy playing in right field? Is Nolan Souza banged up? Like, these are the things we keep talking about with Dave, and at this point, I'm tired of talking. I just want to get on to the games, and it's been good to get out at Baum and see some of these dudes, see some of these games this past weekend, because last week whenever we were doing the show, it had been so long since I had actually watched any of these Razorback pitchers throw, any of these hitters hit, anybody in the field, and so it's nice now to have that under our belts. And man, I'm just so excited to get to some real games. I just got done right before I did this about 2:00. I called my dad and we kind of hashed it out. I signed him up for Flow Sports. We've got him all set up. I think they've got a little app for him on his Roku. He can watch it, and we're going to make sure everybody can watch it. I imagine there's going to be a lot of you doing stuff like that. And, man, I'm excited to get down there. I'm going to be going down. I'm going to try to get there Friday in time for Inside Arkansas Live at noon, and so we'll be there all day Friday. I know John's going to be there tomorrow. Arkansas is going to practice inside Globe Life Field, and so he'll be there to film some of that, maybe give you guys a little bit of look at what that's like. Hopefully he'll get to talk to some players. We'll see what that looks like. But we talked to Dave, and he did confirm the starting rotation, which if you've been listening to the program, you were not surprised by this, which, I say that, it's an obvious thing, but there were people that were surprised by this, but not people that have been listening to the Baumbastic podcast. That's where listening to this program kind of sets you up, gets you the inside track. You're also not going to be surprised by the lineup you see on Friday night because we've been talking about it for months now at this point. It will be Gabe Gackle. We'll get the ball first for Arkansas on Friday. It will be Hunter Dietz making his first career start on Saturday. He has thrown 1.2 innings in his Razorback career. So let's hope we see a little bit more than that on Saturday. That'll be exciting. And then it will be Big Tuna, Colin Fisher, that gets the Game 3 start for Arkansas, which that's the part that I think people are maybe the most surprised by. But I think you guys, most of you in the chat, most of you are ball knowers, most of you are non-casuals that have been listening to the show. You get it at this point. You understand that this is not a demotion for Cole Gibbler. You understand that this does not mean that Colin Fisher is now throwing 99 and he's a different guy. You're just going with a strike thrower. You're going with a veteran, and you're going to have Cole Gibbler in that bullpen, which Dave spoke about that a little bit and how that did factor into the decision. One, Colin Fisher earned it by just being a stud, going out there doing what he does. But with Cole Gibbler, they kind of like having someone they know they can count on, someone they've seen in the line of fire, they've been in the trenches with. They put Cole Gibbler out there in games in Omaha, games in the Super Regional, games on the SEC on Saturday nights, on Friday nights. He's closed games. He's come in the middle of games. Like, he's a guy that there are a lot of things that you can do with him, and I think that it's going to be interesting to see what usage they wound up using with him. Right after that, we talked a little bit to Dave about the Kahio Aloy situation. Just got a little bit of an update. As we all know at this point, it was not a great weekend for Kahio Aloy on the defensive side of the ball. Really struggled. I think he made 3 errors total in right field. Just not a great day at the office. And what Dave said is he kind of thinks it's maybe a little bit more mental at this point, a little bit of a confidence issue and some technique things. Very interesting, and I was not expecting this. He said that Dominic Fletcher has been working with Kahio Aloy, which, if you remember Dominic Fletcher, I'd say one of the bigger fan favorites that have come through Fayetteville in the last decade or so. Obviously a huge part of a couple very good Omaha Razorback teams. I think he was like a second-round pick, has played in the big leagues, like a very respected guy that we all know and love. And in my opinion, the best center fielder that Dave Van Horn has had, or at least in the years that I've really been watching full-time. I don't think I've seen a better overall outfielder when you take into account the arm, the angles, the jumps he would get. A good athlete too. Arkansas's had better athletes in center field, but Dominic Fletcher, there was no wasted movement. If there's someone that I want to be teaching my outfielders how to get that first step, how to read the ball off the bat, Dominic Fletcher is certainly the guy. And so I thought that was very interesting. And I think that's also a really cool part for this program is you've got these guys that, Heston Kjerstad, Dominic Fletcher, Andrew Benintendi, Ryan Stanek, Jalen Beeks, whoever, that are coming by and are around these players. James McCann is able to talk to Ryder Helfrich. Like, these are very valuable things. And I think it's cool for these players to, you watch these guys on TV. These guys are big leaguers. That's what you want to be. I think that's awesome. I see Angel actually in the chat saying that maybe Uncle Monte Harrison could help him out. I never thought about that. That's interesting. Maybe they should have Monte Harrison go over and teach a little bit of class on outfielding and all that. Of course, he played in the big leagues in the outfield as well. I'm all for Dominic Fletcher helping out. Dominic Fletcher also just one of the cooler guys to be around, one of our great California Razorbacks. So I thought that was very interesting. But again, I think there's a lot of people who are of the belief that you can't play Kahio Aloy in right field because he's not a great defender, and DVH just won't accept a bad defender in right field. And I understand why you would think that. And listen, you don't want to have a bad defender. anywhere on the field. But outfield, especially with the way that last year ended, I know that's something that's going to be kind of fresh on people's minds. Need I remind you that Heston Kjerstad made about 10 errors in left field as a freshman, and he cost Arkansas runs at the beginning of the season. He cost Arkansas runs at the middle of the season. He cost Arkansas runs in the College World Series finals. Matter of fact, if you go back and watch the Oregon State series, the one game that Arkansas won when Blaine Knight was on the mound, the only run he allowed was because they hit a 2-out fly ball to Heston Kjerstad, who just completely lost the ball in the sun. It ends up bouncing right next to him, bounces over the fence, ends up being a 2-out run, which should have been out number 3 and should have been moved on. And I'm not saying, again, that's what you want in the outfield, but Heston Kjerstad, of course, stayed in there. They never even really considered making a move there, moving him to DH, because they knew how valuable he was, because they knew, hey, Luke Bonfield, we want to DH him. And so we kind of need Heston to play left field. We need to get him better and need to get him ready. And that's where he's going to have a chance to play professionally. And so they kind of just put that on Heston of like, hey, just go get better. And what did Heston Kjerstad do? He got a little bit better. His next couple of years in right field, he was a lot more solid and he had a good throwing arm. And so he's able to make some plays. I think that's the hope with Kahio Aloy, that he could do something similar. We also remember Kendall Diggs, who, when they first started playing him in the outfield, it was like, holy cow, what are we going to do? All of a sudden, he starts making some plays, gets some confidence, gets some reps, gets used to playing out there. That is what they are hoping and planning happens with Kahio. Now, Dave did say, if it really becomes an issue, maybe we'll reconsider. Maybe we'll change things up. But as we go into the season, I think everyone in the fan base thinks there's like a discussion about who's going to play right field. If you talk to the coaching staff, both Matt Hobbs and Dave Van Horn, neither of them have even suggested anyone other than Kahio Aloy starting in right field. I think that's the mentality they're going to take, at least to start the season. Now, again, if he makes 5 errors this weekend, all right, we'll just say, all right, we just can't do this thing. It's not sustainable, whatever. But I think they are prepared to take some lumps there. And I think that's, I'm not saying you have to be happy about it, but that is just what is happening in real life. Again, he also said the lineup is mostly set aside from, and I quote, a coin flip at left field. Now, that coin flip we believe to be between Damian Ruiz and Christian Turner. You got a right-handed hitter in Ruiz, a left-handed hitter in Christian Turner. You got a redshirt junior, which, by the way, Damian Ruiz, redshirt junior. I didn't realize this until a couple weeks ago. Redshirt junior that hypothetically could come back for another year at Arkansas. Hopefully he has a great year and gets drafted, but that is interesting to me. And then you got a freshman in Christian Turner who's really pushing, had a really tremendous offseason, has put himself in a great position, great athlete, great upside, a lot of power to the opposite side, power to the pull side, can hit a double, can steal a bag, can do a lot of interesting things. Ruiz, by the way, been a very solid defender in left field, I would say, like an above average corner outfielder, I would argue, which does help his case just a little bit. I did not mention Zach Stewart in that little stanza. I think Stewart's going to get his opportunities. I think he's going to get his ABs, perhaps some pinch hit opportunities, perhaps, maybe a spot start at right field, spot start at right or at DH, spot start in left field. We shall see. But I think he's another guy that's kind of in this mix. But when Dave said coin flip, I believe he was referring to Christian Turner and Damian Ruiz. And that's really the only spot in the lineup that is up for grabs, so to speak. He mentioned Nolan Souza. They're probably going to roll Nolan Souza, not only in the DH spot, but in the leadoff spot, which, sometimes I say things to you on this show where I say it and I'm saying it because I kind of know, like whether I've had a conversation or I've been out there in the scrimmages and I've seen some things happen and I kind of have an inkling. About a month ago, I floated around Nolan Souza as a potential leadoff option. I said him, Micah New, and Damian Ruiz were kind of the three guys once Brenton Clark went down that I thought Mike could be that leadoff guy, perhaps maybe even Cam Kojal. When I floated Nolan Souza around, that was not an example of me like sharing something that I knew, like a scoop or anything like that. I just kind of thought, hey, I think Souza, I know he strikes out a lot, but he also walks a lot, likes to work deep into counts, and he's got, maybe the most speed on the team, had 9 stolen bases halfway through the year last year. Like, if he doesn't get hurt, he probably steals 15 to 20 bags. I thought that, he just kind of strikes me as a guy that would be kind of a Braden Webby type of leadoff guy. Micah New, I think, would also fit that kind of criteria because he does strike out a good bit, but he's not afraid to draw his walks, not afraid to steal a bag, not afraid to put some pressure on the defense. And so nowadays in modern baseball, you're starting to see more of these power hitters, leading off for their teams. And I think Nolan Souza, who, again, might be the fastest player on the team, I think it works, and that's what they're rolling with. So I think that's a good decision. I'm interested to see what that looks like. Arkansas does face a left-handed pitcher on Friday night, so we'll see if that maybe affects the decision, if maybe they decide to go with a new there. But based on what Dave said today, it seemed like that's kind of the direction they're going to go. So without further ado, let's hop into this chat real quick. And if I get bored later, maybe I will give you guys my top 5 most underrated Razorbacks. But for now, we are going to start in the chat. I'm seeing some roll in, man. I appreciate this. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. I mean, listen, it's midday. We're in the middle of the workday. We got people in here chatting, talking about baseball. Hopefully, as the season rolls on, we get deeper into the season. We do more of these things, and it becomes a thing, and people just kind of know Wednesdays at 3 p.m. or Tuesdays if the basketball team's playing. Time to learn some baseball, so people will kind of know. Before we got to start with our boy, Grant Toynton. Grant Toynton. I hope I have that right. This may have happened while we were on Inside Arkansas Live, but I don't care. Either way, we appreciate you, Grant. Thank you for being here. Appreciate you tuning in. And our guy, Lazy Turtle, says, I can confirm nothing goes on in the office after 3. Great idea, Ellis. Yeah, that's what I was hoping for. Obviously, I know some people also work from home. Some people are just kind of doing their thing. Maybe you're in school, whatever the context is. But I'm also thinking there's a few people that are probably just sitting at their desk at work and have their headphones in and, just grooving here. Okay, so I saw this chat from Lane Hedge, one of our top members, one of our top ball knowers, baseball fans in the chat. And he says, maybe it's just me, but I'm surprised Landon Schaefer hasn't done much throughout fall ball. I'd assume if he sees the field this season, it'll probably be in midweek games only, unless he finally gets going. So I wanted to talk about this because, of course, last year when the MLB draft happened, it was a very big deal when Landon Schaefer, Fayetteville high school kid, Arkansas's top-rated position player in their high school class, which, by the way, this current freshman class for Arkansas, you guys may not know this, the number 1 class in the country, depending on where you look. Now, some have them number 2, some have them number 4, whatever, but like one of, if not the literal best classes in the country. Landon Schaefer was a guy that not many people expected to come to Fayetteville. In fact, all during last baseball season, when I'm kind of thinking ahead to the roster, I was not thinking with Landon Schaefer in mind. In fact, I interviewed Carson Brumbaugh before the draft. The week before the draft, I interviewed Carson Brumbaugh on the show because I thought Landon Schaefer was going to sign, and therefore Carson Brumbaugh would wind up being Arkansas's new highest-rated position player. Had I known Schaefer was going to make it to campus, I probably would have interviewed him, frankly. But I ended up interviewing Brumbaugh. Of course, that aged very well because now he's going to end up being the starting shortstop for Arkansas, so it's all fine and dandy. But I think a lot of people have been a little bit surprised that Landon Schaefer is not really pushed for a starting spot. I do want to clarify that he has been a little bit better. Like he's starting to have some good ABs. He actually hit a ball, weirdly enough. He hit a line drive like 102 or 103 off the bat, and he hit it right at Kahio Aloy, who caught it like way up over his head the other day. And he made the play. It's great, counts as an out, but it was like another one of those plays where you're like, whew, man, that's it's going to be a little bit of an adventure there in right field. But that was a good swing. He then had a double the other day off the wall in left field against Steel Eves, I believe. And so Schaefer's starting to at least show some flashes. And this is a very athletic kid. He's got a long, wiry frame. I was speaking to our boy, why am I blanking on his name? Joe Doyle. I was speaking to our boy Joe Doyle, and he still kind of views Landon Schaefer as a legitimate. I think he had him in the top 100 of the freshman class in terms of prospects for, I guess that would be the 2028 draft. There's still a lot of upside there, a lot of potential. He's been playing center field, which I think is a great fit for him. Not that he can't play infield. He played a little bit of third in the fall. I think center field, he's a plus athlete. He's got a real chance to be like a really good center fielder. And so I think if that back can continue to come along, I think there's still a role for Landon Schaefer somewhere. I also think, frankly, if we're doing the Kahio Aloy thing in right field, we know that Arkansas likes to go with defensive replacements in the 8th and 9th inning, sometimes in a close game, say it's 6-4 in the 9th inning, and Kahio Aloy just batted in the bottom of the 8th. I think you'll see a replacement defender come in. Now, that replacement could be Zach Stewart. That replacement could be Christian Turner. That replacement could be Damian Ruiz if he's not in the starting lineup. But I think Landon Schaefer might be a strong candidate for that. And in fact, I think Landon Schaefer is good enough in center field that they might throw Micah New in right field and have Landon Schaefer play center field. Or you have Landon Schaefer come play right field. I don't know. I don't know what Landon Schaefer's comfortable with, but I think he's that good of a defender and that good of an athlete. And I'm not giving up on him as a prospect and as a player. But we've seen this happen a lot here lately where Mason Neville comes to Arkansas freshman year. He's behind Tavian Josenberger, Jared Wagner, Jace Borfin. He's not really able to crack the lineup. He ends up going somewhere else and kind of fulfilling his potential as a prospect. And so Hog fans look at it and they're like, oh, how'd we let that kid leave? Well, it's like, well, it kind of made sense in the moment. Gabe Frazier this past year was on last year's team, played a little bit, got some starts at second base, wasn't in the everyday lineup. Now he's at Florida State where it looks like he's going to start for them, probably going to hit in the middle of the order or something like that, starting to kind of put things together as a player. He could very well end up being one of those guys, Schaefer that is, where he ends up going somewhere else. I'm not saying I want Landon Schaefer to go anywhere else. I hope he ends up being a great player at Arkansas, and I think he's got the chance to do it. But it happens a lot where these guys come in as freshmen and, maybe don't play as much right away, but they end up still developing into very good baseball players. I think Schaefer is a very strong candidate for that. And so we'll see. Hopefully that winds up being at Arkansas and we get to see him be a stud here in Fayetteville. Our boy Ozzie Maverick, who, Ozzie's good. Ozzie's good people, man. I know Ozzie gets a little crazy every now and then, but that's an understatement. He gets very crazy every now and then, but Ozzie's the man. We appreciate the passion. He says over under 114 and a half home runs. So I'm going to go over. I did an episode on the show. I guess this would have been last week at some point, basically just doing math and trying to decide of what is a realistic expectation for Arkansas in the power department. I think if you really start going through it, I think people would be surprised at how many home runs. Honestly, Arkansas is I don't want to say guaranteed to hit because you never know. There's all these variables. There's all these factors. And, someone like Cam Kogel, who hit 15 home runs last year, well, what if he just hits 9? Ryder Helfrich, he hit 15 home runs last year. What if he just hits 10? That could happen. But I think if everyone replicates what they've already shown in their careers, I think people would be surprised at how many home runs it ends up being if you add it all together. I mean, Micah New hit 15 last year. TJ Pompey hit 10 his freshman year 2 years ago, and he's a lot better, a lot bigger, a lot stronger. I think 10 is a soft estimate for him. Someone like Nolan Souza, who hit the most he's hit in a season is 7, but that was as a freshman when he's playing part-time. Souza could be a 10 to 12 home run guy. Carson Brumbaugh, who's a freshman, I think he could be a 10 to 12 home run guy. You start going down the order. I'm not saying Arkansas is going to lead the country in home runs, but I think it's on paper, it's actually very possible they end up right around where they were at last year. And I think they hit 127. So give me over, Ozzie. I think Arkansas hits over 114 home runs, and I think that may be a hot take, but I really don't think it's that hot whenever you really break down the numbers. Our guy Ryan, big baseball fan, Ryan, we appreciate him. He says, okay, Ellis, what early season series is the most interesting? I'm looking to make it up for a weekend set to watch before SEC play starts. So I got to be honest with you. They're all interesting because we all love baseball. We all love the Hogs. And frankly, I don't think, Ryan, there's a bad decision. If you come up and watch Stetson, and Arkansas sweeps them and Stetson ends up not being as good, I don't think you're going to regret that decision. Same would go for Xavier. Who do they play in that fourth one? Let me pull up the schedule real quick. I know it's Xavier, but I would probably, Ryan, if I were you, and I don't know what your schedule's like. I don't know what your situation is going to be like. If you could, because one of them's a 4-game series, right? They play a 4-game series at Baumbastic Stadium. If you're going for just the best overall team, Xavier would probably be the best bet for that. But yeah, they play Xavier in a 3-game series, February 20th to 22nd. That's not this weekend, but next. Then it's UT Arlington that they play a 3-game series against. And then Stetson is who they play 4 games against right before they open up SEC play. So if you could make it swing, and you could stick around for that Monday game at noon, I think that might be a fun one. But I think if you're just looking for the best team, Xavier's probably your answer there. I can't remember if they made the tournament last year or if they were a fringe tournament team, but I know they were at least pretty good last year. I think that one is probably the one you should keep your eye on. And on the same kind of topic, Eureka String says, yo, Ellis, you got me into baseball. Followed last season. I want to get tickets to a home series this year, but can only go to one. Which do you think is going to be the best atmosphere? So, weirdly enough, they open SEC play with Mississippi State, who is loaded. Mississippi State's got a very good roster. They're anywhere in the top 5 to 10 in all the polls, similar to Arkansas. It's going to be SEC, first week in the SEC, which is always a fun thing. That will be pretty fun. Now, that might overlap with basketball. In fact, I'm fairly confident it will. I think the NCAA tournament maybe starts that next weekend. So actually, maybe this one will work pretty well for you. That one is a very good one. You have the Florida series, March 27th through the 29th. That's when they're doing the Norman Bryan jerseys. Florida's also a team that has a ton of talent, a lot of really good arms. Like, you come to that series, Liam Peterson, Florida's Friday night starter, might be, him and Gabe Gackle. If him and Gabe Gackle are throwing against one another, you might literally be seeing the number 1 college pitcher in the country versus the number 2 college pitcher in the country, and you can argue it, back either way. And there's some other guys in that mix, but that would be one that I would keep my eye on. But if Arkansas is in the Sweet 16, knowing you, Eureka Strings, you're probably not going to want to be at Baum Walker if Arkansas is in the Sweet 16. So I'll go Georgia. Georgia's probably your safest bet for a lot of reasons. Now, this is a Thursday through Saturday series, Thursday, April 16th through April 18th. But Georgia, they're an interesting team if you look at projections, because there's some people who are like, oh yeah, Georgia's a top 5 team in the country. They're going to Omaha. They might push for a natty. But there's some people who have them. I think they were picked 9th in the SEC according to the coaches. So the coaches in the SEC are a little bit down on Georgia. I believe they have 23 or 24 transfer players, which is a lot, and so and it's a great transfer class. A lot of really good players. Of course, we know they stole Joey Volchko from Arkansas. Their Friday night starter is a guy that Arkansas thought they were getting until literally he made his announcement. I'm talking about hours before Volchko made his announcement. That's when Arkansas found out they weren't getting him. It really went down that closely to the wire. So, and of course, you've got Wes Johnson as their head coach, former Razorback assistant, former DBH disciple. And so 2 really good teams at home. Weather should be great. Basketball season will be over. We will have already done the parade and everything. I think if you're trying to eyeball one, Eureka, I think the Georgia series, even though it's a Thursday through Saturday, probably your best, safest bet for just a fun weekend at Baum-Walker Stadium. But of course, the closer you get to June, the better the crowds are going to be, the better the weather's going to be, the better just everything. And so, if you end up going to the Oklahoma series in May, I think you'll wind up having a good time. Frankly, it's hard to have a bad time at Baum, if I'm just being honest with you. Scooby Doobies, 3698, he says, Andrew, what are you more concerned about this year, hitting or pitching? So this is a fascinating question. It's a very simple question. Just, hey, which one are you more confident in? So if you had asked me this a month ago, I definitely would have said pitching. And I'm not saying I'm just completely sold now that Arkansas's got, this loaded pitching staff, and there's so much returning in the lineup, and the thing about the hitting is that I think they have a very high floor, because even if everyone except the returners suck, you would still have Cam Kojal, who's going to hit at least 300 plus power, plus leadership, plus experience, all that. Ryder Helfrich, one of the best players in the country, power over 300. You just kind of can expect that. Even Cahillo, who I know is a little bit boomer bust, Cahillo's not just going to not hit. He's not just going to not hit balls hard throughout the year. He's going to have his fair share of damage as well. And I think there's also just some of these guys that have played ball, a lot of experience. So there's really a very high floor for Arkansas's lineup. I think the worst case scenario is you're looking at a upper middle of the pack type of SEC lineup. That being said, I think I am more concerned about the hitting, and I'm not concerned about it. Let me just make that clear. I think Arkansas is going to have a good staff and a good lineup. But I gotta be honest, TJ Pompey has been solid. I don't know if I'm super confident that he's about to have this breakout year that really ascends him to being a top 50 prospect. Micah New has been good throughout the offseason. I feel pretty confident in him. Ruiz has been okay. That's kind of a guy that we're now finding ourselves in a little bit of a coin flip. I'm still a Ruiz believer. I think Ruiz is going to end up being good for Arkansas, and I think we're going to look back in April and May and be like, holy cow, why were we even doing this discussion with Damian Ruiz? Clearly he's a stud. Clearly they need his skill set. Good defender and left, all that. But as it stands today on February 11th at 3:30, I'm a little bit more concerned about the hitting. But like I said, I think worst case, you're looking at, upper middle of the pack of the SEC. Whereas pitching, I'm like fairly confident Arkansas's got one of the best pitching staffs in the entire country. That might be a bold take a little bit. And that is also me just giving a lot of props to Matt Hobbs, who just always does good stuff. But I think I'm more confident in the pitching right now. Lane says, who's the one guy that might not start opening weekend, but will absolutely matter by April? I'm assuming he means in the lineup. Because if you're going with the lineup, then I think Christian Turner is probably that guy. And like of the guys who are not going to start opening day, and opening day, I expect the lineup to have Ruiz in left field. Everybody else we've talked about, Souza at DH, Aloy in right field, whatever. I think Turner is probably the most likely candidate. But give me Zach Stewart though still, because I think Zach Stewart, he might end up just being, I hate to say this, in that Charlie Welch role as just your like go-to pinch hitter, and I don't anticipate he's going to have quite as much success as Charlie Welch had in that role. He was like built for it. But I think Zach Stewart's going to be a guy that will get at-bats in key moments for Arkansas. And this is another dude that has a lot of power, a lot of proven production throughout his career. Maybe hasn't hit great against elite competition, but he's a senior, older dude. There's a lot of maturity with him. I think he's a fun guy that everybody likes. Give me Zach Stewart. I think he's kind of flying very far under the radar. And I think we all understand he's not going to be in the starting lineup, but I think he's a guy that will matter a little bit. Now that I think about it, Brendan Kleiman, the backup catcher, he had a really good day at the plate the other day. He had two doubles and a single the other day, and he was facing some pretty damn good arms. Brendan Kleiman is a stud. I think he's very overqualified for his backup catching position. Papa Dragon says, been watching Baumbastic since the first episode, so ready for another baseball season start. It made me look like a genius when I was telling people preseason that Gackle was going to be great. That was another one where, like, I mentioned Carson Brumball, how I just brought in the number one freshman in the class and was like, oh yeah, I told you guys Carson Brumball was good. And it's like, he was a unanimous top 100 prospect, respected by the draft. I mean, very much wasn't a hot take. Same kind of thing with Gackle, where the Arkansas coaching staff was stunned that Gabe Gackle made it to campus because he was that good coming out of high school, that well-rounded. And so, I brought him on the show, and hopefully I was able to introduce him to some of y'all, but I was definitely not the guy who discovered Gabe Gackle as much as I would like to take credit for it. And I do like to joke about that. Every time I see Gabe, I always make the joke where I'm like, you were a complete nobody before you came on this very program. Got to meet his dad, by the way. Shout out to Peter Gackle. I believe I have that name right. Peter Gackle. Shout out to Peter Gackle. Met him the other day. Good people, good family. I think his parents pretty much live in Fayetteville during baseball season. And hopefully we get to see his brother down in Arlington. But yeah, the Gackle family, they've been good to Arkansas baseball. They've been good to me. I appreciate them for sure. Okay, so Ozzy has a good question here. And well, really, Ryan says, can you preview the other teams in Arlington? Ozzy, wants to know, can we rank the teams from worst to best or best to worst? So TCU is the obvious answer here because they have a nice little shiny number next to their name. They're the team on Saturday. That's going to be like the big headliner of the weekend. That'll have the biggest crowd. They should have a decent amount of fans there because obviously are from Arlington, as our guy Kingsley knows. So TCU is very good. Now, thankfully for Arkansas, you will not have to face Tommy Lepore, who Arkansas faced last year in game 2. He was their big right-handed pitcher that threw like 96, 98. He is a top 150 draft guy, like probably going to be like a second, third round pick on the mound. He's their Friday night starter, or at least projected to be. I haven't checked to see if their coach, announced their rotation or whatever. I'm going to go out on a limb and say he probably will be. So you don't have to face him, but I think TCU is probably the best overall team that Arkansas is going to face. But I got to say, looking into Oklahoma State a little bit, man, there's some talent over there. And Josh Holliday's done a good job as their head coach. They're pretty consistent. They make the tournament pretty much every year. Obviously, Arkansas has some history with them. Played them in the 2022 Stillwater Regional. We saw how good that Oklahoma State team was. Like, that's what made that series so fun, was how good Oklahoma State was and how talented and scary that lineup was. And I don't think they're necessarily on that level this year, but I think Oklahoma State's being a little bit underrated. I mean, they've got some real prospects on their squad. Got an outfielder, Colin Ritchie, who's a top 150 draft guy. Hit 15 home runs last year, 294, 6'2", 220, very physical guy, which is a theme. Like a lot of their guys, they've got another outfielder, Alex Conover, I don't know how you pronounce it. He's 6'4", 210 pounds. Only had 6 home runs last year, but I think he had 29 hits, 13 extra base hits. Big, physical, athletic guy. One of their top pitchers is actually out, but he's a 6'9", 240 pitcher who's a top 200 prospect as well. They've got another outfielder, TP Wentworth, who transferred from Clemson, 6'5", 230. So, like, that outfield alone, like, those are some big old dudes that are athletic, a lot of talent, a lot of power. A lot of the players on Oklahoma State's roster, at least the guys that are going to be in the lineup for them this weekend, you look at their numbers and from last year, and they maybe don't blow you away. Like, there's a lot of guys that are like 255 with 8 home runs or something like that, maybe aren't super accomplished, but there's some experience, there's some talent, a lot of athleticism, and that's just kind of the way that they do things. I mean, you think back to that 2022 team. You had that Nolan McLean kid who was just a big third baseman, could hit the ball 450 feet. Rock Riggio, obviously. Like, that's kind of how they do it at Oklahoma State. They also have a really good freshman class, which, we'll see how many of those freshmen end up really helping, right away for them, especially in game literal number 1 of the season. But I think Oklahoma State, they're not in any of the top 25 polls that I've seen. And I don't know for sure. I'm not well versed on the entire country, but I have a hard time believing there's 25 teams that are for sure better than Oklahoma State. I think they're a little bit better than people are giving them credit for. So I will go TCU 1, Oklahoma State 2, and Texas Tech, I think, is kind of a distant third. Not that they're bad. I mean, Tim Tadlock is, he's a legend in the sport. He's done a great job with that program. He's been there for as long as I can remember. Like, I genuinely can't remember the last Texas Tech coach before him. They have the transfer portal NIL has not been super kind to Texas Tech. Because, I mean, you think back to 5-6 years ago, Texas Tech always had big-time talent, always had top prospects. I mean, they had a kid, Josh Young, who's playing for the Rangers right now, who's a top 5 overall pick. Like, Texas Tech always had dudes in the past. Not exactly that way. In fact, our guy Joe Doyle on overslot.com, it's a really good website. It's a paid thing. You have to get a subscription. Not saying you need to do that, but like, if you're really into following prospects and knowing which teams have good prospects, overslot.com is a very good tool for that. They do this thing where, like, basically anyone on your roster who is ranked in the top 300 of their class, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, they will have it marked down. So if you click on, Arkansas versus Oklahoma State, it's going to show all of Arkansas's top prospects that are ranked, and it goes for each class. And then Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, there were only like 2 dudes who are ranked in any class on their roster right now. Now, perhaps they have a roster full of diamonds in the rough that are about to just come take it to the Razorbacks on Sunday. I'll get a look at them this weekend and have a little bit better feel. But I was stunned to see, just on paper, Texas Tech just not exactly what they used to be, man. And, I think I saw our guy, Big Pig ASAP, Aiden, was saying he has some buddies that are Texas Tech guys, and they are not confident about their team. They do not like their program. Very, very interesting. Lane wants to know, what's one overreaction you expect from the fan base after the first weekend? I think this is an easy one. I think Arkansas has not hit very well in Arlington really any of the years that I can remember. 2021, they went 3-0 and they swung the bats pretty well then. But even that year, they had a couple games. I think they had like a 3-1 game and maybe a 2-0 game or something like that. Really, it's just that first game against Texas Tech, weirdly enough, that Arkansas got the bats going. 2023, they beat Texas on that Friday night, and it was like 2-1. Then they got hammered by the TCU team that wound up eliminating them. I think they lost like 14-4 in that game. And then they kind of got after Oklahoma State in game 3, but like, it wasn't like 3 days full of solid ABs, solid contact. And then 2024, they didn't hit at all in Arlington, like barely scraped by. We're lucky to win 2 games that weekend. And honestly, it was kind of that way last year. You end up losing. I don't remember what the final score was against Kansas State, but it was like a 2-1, 3-2, 4-3 type of game. Sunday against Michigan State, Michigan, they scored a little bit, maybe 6 or 7 runs. but they didn't hit the ball over the yard. And then that Saturday game against TCU, it's like 2-1. And so, will that be the same way this year? I don't know. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say Arkansas is not going to have 10 runs a game in Arlington. It's a big park. A lot of these guys aren't used to, hitting there, aren't used to playing there. It's easy to get, under those lights, and you're kind of like, oh, wow, it's pretty bright in here. Who knows? I think that's going to probably be the overreaction is like, oh, we're right back to it. This lineup sucks. Hell, I even remember myself after they lost to Kansas State game 1 last year. I was like, damn. Coming off of the year Arkansas had offensively, I'm like, damn, man, it really doesn't – it might just be the same offense, man. I was really concerned. So I myself even kind of overreacted a little bit last year. I think that is going to be like a big possible overreaction. And then, of course, if Kahio Aloy makes even one bobble or misplay or takes a weird angle or lets a ball drop, I think people are going to be freaking out about that for sure. Drake White says, I know it's been a thing where former pros come back to work out. How big is it that they are actively helping the team? Is this common at other big programs? So I think for the off season, it's probably pretty common because you're all kind of working out in the same facility. Now, not every program has the facilities that Arkansas has, which is important to remember. Like if you're a big league player who played at, Kansas State, you're probably finding somewhere better to work out and get your offseason work in because you have access to other facilities that are probably better. It's hard to find better facilities than you'll find in Fayetteville. Not to say that big league teams don't have that, but it's like when you're in the offseason as a big leaguer, I think it's cool that people like Dominic Fletcher, they don't have to choose between going home to visit their former stomping grounds and getting their work in. And of course, as you're getting closer to spring training, these guys are training at a pretty high level. You need, some real equipment there. And so I think it helps a lot. I think especially among like the LSUs, Mississippi States, the Arkansas of the world, the Tennessees even, they're starting to kind of upgrade their facilities a little bit. I think it's becoming more and more common. But you got to understand that like in about I think pitchers and catchers reported either yesterday, today, or someday this week, most of these guys are about to go off and do their thing. They're about to go get ready to play for their season. And so like even Dominic Fletcher in 1 week, he'll be off doing his thing. So it's like throughout the year, it's not really something that you see too much, but I think in the off season, it's definitely pretty common for at least the top programs. And I think it definitely helps with Arkansas. And it's a very, very useful tool to have that for your pro guys and be able to kind of sell that up for different guys. Let's see. Oh, we got a super chat here from Aaron. We appreciate this, Aaron. He said, did you do a bold predictions episode like Curtis did for basketball? I might have missed it. And who is a sneaky consideration for most home runs? Okay, I did not do a bold predictions episode. Really, I guess I just kind of like every now and then throw out some bold predictions, which, I'll go ahead and say they're going to break the home run record again this year. They're going to hit 130 home runs. That's your bold prediction. Last year I did do this. I do remember going down and like writing down bold predictions. I had Arkansas leading the country in ERA, which they did not do. I had Ryder Helfrich making an all SEC team, which he didn't do, but he was very close to. I had Arkansas breaking the home run record, I think was in my bold predictions. And I think which they did do. I had Arkansas, I think maybe like being like the last undefeated team or something like that. And then they lost game number 5 of the year. So that one did not pan out, but yeah, give me some time. I'll think about some bold predictions, but in terms of a sneaky consideration for most home runs, when I read this sentence, Mike Anu was the first name that came to my mind, which probably not that bold of a prediction because he did lead the Cape Cod League in home runs. He hit 15 home runs last year at Marshall, but I think if you ask most Razorback fans, they will probably say Ryder Helfrich, Kahio Aloy, maybe Cam Kojal. That's probably the names you're going to hear a lot for like most likely to lead Arkansas in home runs. And I think Helfrich is probably going to be the guy that's going to be hard to beat in this category, but give me Micah New, man. I think he has that kind of upside, could be a 20 home run guy. TJ Pompey is also a sneaky one where like, and frankly, it shouldn't be that sneaky because a lot of scouts are very high on TJ Pompey. I think Joe Doyle has him in the top 120 overall prospects for this year's draft, which a big part of that is the raw power potential. He hit 10 home runs as a freshman, then hit 5 home runs in 19 games as a sophomore. And so I wonder if TJ Pompey had just played his sophomore season out, he probably hits 14, 16 home runs, in which case he would be a preseason All-American who we'd be saying, oh, yeah, he'll probably hit 22 at Arkansas, And so I think he's a guy that that I would say. But there's a lot of good candidates, honestly. That's pretty cool. Ryan says, Dave mentioned Dom would be a great coach. Are there any former Hogs currently working their way into the coaching ranks? I mean, there's a few that have cycled through, Arkansas's program. Like Jake Arledge was a guy about 10 years ago who I think was a grad assistant at Arkansas, and I think he went on to kind of work his way through. We had Matt Goodhart on the podcast last year. He is coaching. He's bounced around a couple of different places. He is at a school in Southern Arkansas, and he's kind of working his way up there. Cullen Smith, another guy that was a grad assistant at Arkansas who's kind of working his way through. Luke Bonfield, who I don't know what Luke Bonfield's current role is. He might have bounced around, but he was with Tennessee for a long time. So yeah, he's kind of starting to make his way. Of course, we've got our guy, Bobby Wernis, our friend here, the third base coach, best third base coach in the history of the program, I'll say. Bobby Wernis, of course, is, obviously been very loyal to Arkansas. He's another guy that would fit this description. Trevor Ezell. You remember Trevor Ezell from that 2019 season? I believe he is now the hitting coach at SEMO, which, SEMO's pretty good. Usually has a pretty good program. Obviously knocked off Arkansas in the regional a few years ago. So those are some off the top of my head. I'm sure I'm missing a few. Shout out to Rocco Pepe, who's on the strength staff for Arkansas right now. But yeah, like that. So let's see. Ryan says, who will win the SEC championship and why will it be Arkansas? I like that a lot. Listen, I think Arkansas genuinely, truly does have a very real chance to win it. Not that they have an easy schedule. There's no such thing as an easy schedule. But, I think Arkansas has a good chance. If it weren't Arkansas, I'll go ahead and give you this. If it weren't Arkansas, I'm having a hard time looking past Tennessee's roster. I've seen a lot of discussion about Tennessee, and they're another team that's kind of polarizing where some polls might have them number 2, number 3 in the country. Some might have them like 14, 15. And I get it because Tony Vitello, when you lose your head coach, that's a big deal, right? I am having a hard time looking at that roster and saying, we're sure this team's not going to win 45, 48, 50 games. Like that is interesting to me. LSU, of course, they have a very well-rounded roster. Jay Johnson's got that thing rolling. You got to give them their credit. They're a good candidate. But I think Tennessee is kind of a team that people are overlooking a little bit, and I just think that's actually kind of insane. Garrett McCollum wants to know who's the biggest dirtbag candidate this season. Performance not included this year's Davalon. So yeah, like last year we talked about this. I felt like Rocco Pepe, had he been in the lineup every day, would have been that like unanimous, dirtbag fan favorite type of guy. But I think Mike Anu is this guy. In fact, I don't know if you guys follow me on Twitter, but I tweeted out a video yesterday of him where Hogs Plus had him mic'd up, and his Instagram bio is just the truth. That's his Instagram bio. And he said his boys on Summer Ball were kind of making fun of him for it. Kind of like, oh, hey, here comes the truth. And then all of a sudden he starts hitting some home runs, winds up being MVP of the whole damn league. And it's like, yeah, all of a sudden it ain't that funny anymore. Now I am the truth. He is that guy who just walks onto every field and he's like, I'm the guy. This is my field. I'm the best player out here. Everyone here in the audience, they came to see me. He has that confidence. He has that swagger. He also has the batting stance that I think is just definitely going to like draw attention. I think people are going to like that for sure. Very interesting question here from Ryan. He says, what are the odds that Carson Wiggins, runs it back in 27? Still has tons of leverage as he would just be a junior. I feel like we got robbed of prime Jackson Wiggins, and I really hope we don't get robbed of Carson. So in terms of Carson Wiggins coming back next year, I do not have any inside information on this. Like, I don't have a scoop to share for you. And even if I did, I probably wouldn't air that out here. So what I'm about to say is kind of a guess and borderline speculative, however you want to look at it. I'm still going to say it's way less than 50%, I would say, just because I think if Carson does not pick up a baseball this year, I think he's still looking at a signing bonus somewhere between 1.5 million, somewhere in that maybe 2 million range. And you mentioned leverage. That is why also I think he's a guy, no matter where Carson, like if he gets, let's say Carson Wiggins gets drafted 64th overall, and you might look at that slot value and it might be, like 1.1 million or whatever. And you're like, 1.1 million, they could probably put something together and get him to come back. If he is going to get drafted there, that means he is signing for way more than that. Because if you're a sophomore who has the leverage, like you said, you're not just going to sign for your typical slot value. I think that probably means he would be agreeing to a deal more than that, which is something to consider in this whole thing. But you're definitely right that we got robbed of seeing Jackson Wiggins his junior year. I will go to my grave, and it's a little bit easier to make this case now. I will go to my grave saying that if Jackson Wiggins had been healthy for that junior season, he was going to be a solid to good Friday night starter for Arkansas. Would he have been what Hagan was in 2024? Probably not. Would he have been, Isaiah Campbell or anything like that? Probably not. Would he have had some ups and downs? Maybe, but I do think he was going to be very good. He was throwing the ball so well leading up to that injury. He was dominant in the fall at times. The command had really taken a step forward. The velocity had always been there. And now, by the way, you're seeing, Jackson Wiggins is one of the top 100 prospects in the entire planet. He is now living up to that potential in the Cubs organization. I don't think he would have, what he did this past year with the Cubs. I don't know if he would have been able to do that, but I think he was going to be very good. And so I think that's definitely something to think about. And I see Porkenstein says Wiggins may come back late like Wood last year. I think this is an objectively true statement. Now, will he for sure? No, we don't know that. Nobody could say that right now. There is a lot that needs to happen. I do believe that Carson has picked up a baseball and has thrown that baseball into a catcher's mitt in very recent days, like in the last couple weeks. I think that has happened a little bit, not a ton, nothing crazy. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn for saying this. There is still a lot to go from that to pitching on the mound in games, but we've said it. And by the way, shout out to Carson Brumball, who reported this on my show accidentally. I just kind of asked him because they grew up together, and I was like, hey, what do you think about Carson Wiggins? And he was the first guy that I remember saying publicly, yeah, so we might get Carson back by May. That was the first time I had heard anybody say that. And then Dave said that at the Swatters Club. He was like, hey, he might pitch in May, he might not. And then Dave a couple days later kind of said, hey, yeah, he's throwing. We'll see. They're obviously not going to put pressure on Carson. And you need to be careful with this. And we all agree, you don't put him out there unless you are like 100% confident, unless you are 100% sure he's clear and ready to go, and unless his family, and his circle, they feel good about it. You just don't want to do this thing where you're like forcing him to come back out there and then all of a sudden he looks horrible, or all of a sudden he tweaks something weird. You just don't want that. But I definitely think it's a very real possibility that Carson Wiggins pitches this year. Still, I think we as fans need to be prepared for, him to not pitch. And we should not do the thing where we're like, oh, you're not a real hog. Gage Wood is a real hog. You're not a real hog. I really don't think we should be doing that. But I do think it's very possible that he pitches. In terms of him coming back next year, that's going to take a lot of selling for me. And I know Dave is trying to get that going, and he's been making jokes about passing the pot around, passing a little potluck around so we can get another year of Carson Wiggins. And listen, I'm all for it. I just think that is a little bit of a tough sell. But, if he ends up being a top 10 pick next year, he would then quadruple whatever his signing bonus would be this year at the very least. Let's see. Yeah, Kevin Spencer wants to know if everything will be televised anywhere. Yeah, it's just Flow Sport this weekend, which sucks. Ooh, Grant wants to know. Grant coming in with the heat, becoming a member, man. Says, who do you see eventually replacing Dave when he retired if you could pick anyone? So if I could pick anyone, I would probably pick Tony Vitello. Now, one, because he's got a very accomplished resume. We'll see what he does at the big league level, but my job is based in content. My job is based on getting people to view Arkansas baseball. Tony Vitello would very much help in that regard. He would be a great personality. And I don't know if you could find a better candidate to coach a college baseball program right now than Tony Vitello. So that would be, if I could pick anyone, that would be who I would roll with. And I know a lot of people say Wes Johnson, and I'm not saying Wes Johnson isn't going to be a candidate. He's from Arkansas. He's been here before. He knows what this program is about. I think DVH very views him in high regard. I am not sure that is necessarily where we're headed. In fact, I think Matt Hobbs probably has a better chance to be Arkansas's next head coach than Wes Johnson does. That is a little bit of a speculation guess from me, just based on some things that have been said here lately. But I think Hobbs is a guy that we have to consider. And I know that may not be the sexiest option ever, but I think he's a very real possibility. And he's put in a lot of work for this program, man. He's done a lot. And I think he's kind of earned the respect of us, the fan base, the respect of DVH. But who knows? I mean, Dave might coach 5 more years, in which case there might be a guy that we've never heard of that all of a sudden becomes a great candidate in college baseball. And so we'll just kind of see how this works. Jaron with a great question here. He says, Andrew, when Souza comes back to the field, who comes out of the lineup? Pompey, Brumball, how does that look? So this is a great question because we don't know. We really don't. I also would say, it's not 100% guarantee. Like Souza might just crush it at DH, and they might just say, and then, if Cajillo's playing serviceable defense in right field and Pompey looks great at third, Brumball looks good at short, they might just say, hey, let's just keep it going status quo. Let's just roll with that. I think Kojal is a guy you maybe would look at, but Kojal has been playing some really good defense at second base. I know they like Souza's glove. He's a little bit better athlete there, but I think Kojal's still, I don't they think he's a guy that we got to upgrade that second base position. Believe it or not, I think shortstop would probably be the clearest path. And Brumball is a guy that I think Brumball's a stud. And I know he hasn't necessarily had a ton of offensive flashes here lately. He did in the fall for sure. And so I'm sure he's going to have his ups and downs at the plate. Personally, I expect Brumball to end up doing enough damage to stay in that lineup every day. But I think if Souza were going to come back and play the field, I think it would probably be at shortstop. Or maybe you play Souza at third and have Pompey play shortstop. He played there the other day. He looked pretty good. Some combination of that would maybe be the way I would go. I also think Brumball's potential to pitch. Now, he hasn't been throwing. He hasn't been throwing bullpens. He hasn't been throwing against hitters. If you're trying to move someone to DH, maybe you move Brumball to DH and say, hey, for right now, don't worry about playing short. Let's just have you hitting and pitching. Just you're going to DH. You're going to come in the 8th inning and throw 97. Who knows? I'm completely spitballing here at this point, but I think if Souza's going to come back and play the field, I think shortstop is a very real possibility. And if he's able to do that, I think it's very possible for him to make a lot of money this summer for sure. Let's see. I love this. Kopesky. Wow, Kopesky. Did not expect to see him in here. He says, need the freshman pitchers to catch fire. Just getting 1 or 2 pitchers to be reliable to help take pressure off the bullpen. It's a long season. No, this is for sure. I mean, regardless of what role, even if these freshmen wind up just being midweek guys that are able to eat up those Tuesday games, to get through a 65-game season, man, you're going to need a lot of different guys. And Arkansas's got a lot of candidates for this, man. Mark Brissy's been throwing the ball really well. Joey Lorenzini's a stud. Peyton Lee, we saw how good he threw against the starting lineup. They didn't announce him as a starter, but I'm pretty confident Peyton Lee's going to start on Monday, so we'll see what he looks like. They got some candidates for sure, man. I mean, listen, this is an elite recruiting class, and Davis said it multiple times, you're going to need these freshmen to get to Omaha. And that is not just Carson Brumball. That is not just Christian Turner. That is not just Landon Schaefer or whoever. And that is not just any one of these pitchers. You're going to need that freshman class to give you something. You might not end up needing them that much, but don't be surprised if some of these freshmen kind of force the issue a little bit. Butcher Boy wants to know what freshman position or pitcher will make the biggest impact on the team if you have to pick today. So I think Brumball is the easy answer here because he's most likely going to start opening day at shortstop, which I think it hasn't happened since 2007. That's a big deal. And Peyton Lee was so good the other day, and he's going to be really good. I mean, the Peyton Lee's taken a huge jump here in the last couple months, and so he's really good. But give me Mark Brissy, man. Mark Brissy, in terms of pitchers, Brissy's been the most consistent, and the thing I love about him is the command is well above average. Is he necessarily going to be a weekend starter quality type of guy right away. But I don't know, like the stuff is good, consistent, like 93 to 95. We've seen him touch 96, 97 here at times. He's throwing 3 pitches for strikes. He's working pretty quick. He's holding runners. He's working through these innings pretty quickly. Like he looks like a dude that is just ready to roll right away. And so I think if any of those freshman pitchers were to like really wind up like closing games on the weekend, similar to what Gibbler was doing last year, I think it would probably be Brissy at this point. Let's see. Oh man, I'm seeing a bunch of these chats, man. I appreciate everybody. Appreciate everybody tuning in, man. This is awesome. We've gone over an hour, and we're just gonna keep rolling through this thing. Ryan says, didn't we play Oklahoma State this offseason, or was that last? That was last year, and that was an Oklahoma State team that wound up like, yeah, I think they made the tournament, but they kind of wound up being a little bit of a down year for Oklahoma State, and I think that's probably why people are a little bit sour on them and why they're a little bit underrated right now. I think Oklahoma State's better than they were last year for sure when Arkansas got an up close and personal look. This year, Arkansas played DBU and Little Rock to start. Let's see. Borgenstein says, will Arkansas face every team's ace? I don't believe so. I could be wrong, and I'll just fully transparent. I haven't like looked and seen if any of these teams have like, I'm sure some of them have like announced their rotation. I don't think that, I think Arkansas is a big deal. I think they're, everyone knows it's a big game, and that's probably one everyone has circled, but I don't think these teams are going to like jerk around their schedule of how they throw their guys just to have a chance to beat Arkansas, but we shall see. We shall see. And then, yeah, I agree with Papa Dragon here. He says most teams stick to what their usual weekend rotation would be, I imagine. Prioritize, keep consistent schedule for their guys. That's the thing. Like if you throw your Friday night starter on Sunday, well, then he can't throw on Friday for you the next week without it being a little bit weird. It kind of just, because these guys also throw bullpens throughout the week. Like if you throw Friday night, you're probably throwing a bullpen on Tuesday or Wednesday, and you're turning around and throwing Friday again. Like it kind of becomes a thing. And so the only time you really switch up that schedule is when you have a weird Thursday through Saturday week, and then that allows you to kind of reevaluate, or maybe you have some weather that affects things. But yeah, I don't think anybody's going to do anything crazy and like throw their ace on Sunday against Arkansas. I hope Tommy Laporte doesn't pitch on Saturday. Grant wants to know dark horse coach to replace Dave when he retires. I guess Matt Hobbs isn't a dark horse, is he? So let me think about this for a second. Let me really think about this for a second. Because I'm trying to do the math here of like when this could happen. Because if it's this offseason, like if Arkansas wins the national title and Dave retires right after, you're probably not going to get whoever that dark horse is. You know who I wish, like if Tony Vitello had stayed at Tennessee, my dark horse would have been Josh Elander, who's now the head coach at Tennessee, and I think Josh Elander is going to do a great job. He also was on staff at Arkansas for a little bit, and I think he kind of flies under the radar. I don't know, Grant. I don't really have a great answer for you here. Let's just go Bobby Wernes. F it. Bobby Wernes is your guy. He stands the test of time. This would need to happen where like Arkansas wins the Natty, Hobbs and Thompson both go somewhere else, and Bobby sticks around. Maybe Bobby gets promoted to hitting coach or recruiting coordinator or something like that, and then he just kind of shoehorns his way in there. And I love Bobby. I'd love to see it happen, but I'll go with that. But I really don't have a great answer for you in terms of like because frankly, if I'm being 100% transparent, Arkansas is not in a position to where they're going to have to take a chance on some up-and-comer who's like coaching at the JUCO level or anything like that, or some guy that's like coaching at Kent State right now or whatever. Like if Dave Van Horn's passing it on, he's not going to pass it on to some random bum. So I really don't think you're going to get some like off-the-wall name that we've never heard of or anything like that. Appreciate Ryan for the super chat, man. He says supporting baseball content is a good thing. As much as and listen, credit to Ryan one for just being a great sport, because we really kind of get after him a little bit and argue with him all the time on Inside Arkansas Live. He's a great sport about it, and we appreciate that. But also, we know that Ryan loves baseball. And so if you love baseball, you're good in my eyes for sure. Speaking of coaching candidate, can't believe I didn't mention Hudson Polk, who's on staff. He's coaching first for Arkansas. Maybe he's your off-the-wall coaching candidate. But, yeah, he's another guy to throw those guys to throw in that category of like former Razorbacks who are trying to kind of work their way into into the coaching ranks. Ryan says, will Tennessee be less touchy now? Maybe this is supposed to be douchey. Yeah, he says not touchy, douchey. Will they be less douchey now that Tony is gone? Maybe a little bit, but I got to be honest with you. I think Elander is also a big part of that. And Frank Anderson, who's now, I think he was their pitching coach. He's now joining Tony V. I don't know what role he played in that, but I think Elander has a little bit of that personality as well. And also, like, he is a disciple of Tony Vitello, who is also a disciple of Dave Van Horn. Learn from the guys that you're under. I don't think Elander is going to be like, all right, hey, we're running, a nuns clinic over here now, and we're all going to be just, being respectful every time we do it. I think you're still going to see a little bit of that. If I'm honest with you, like, most college baseball teams at this point are a little bit douchey, and that would include the Arkansas Razorbacks. And I say that as a good way. Like, I don't think Arkansas's, they let you hear it a little bit when they do something good against you. They hit a home run. They're not afraid to let you hear it. Kingsley with a very interesting comment here about Micah New says, "Can you be a true dirtbag with that walkout song though?" Referring to Micah New, who has a song, I forget the name. I think it's called "Lush Life" by Zara Larson. Which, by the way, if you missed our Sounds of Bomb review, we yesterday did that on the show. Had a good time with that. I'm going to go the other way, Kingsley, where I'm like, I think doing a white girl walk-up song is kind of like an alpha move, if I'm being honest with you. Because, like, you don't pick a white girl walkout music if you, like, actually are like it's usually a facetious thing, I would imagine. I don't know. I haven't spoken to Micah New about it. I'm actually going the other way, where I think it actually makes him, like, more of a dirtbag. But I do kind of get what you're saying. Like, if he had, for example, Rocco Pepe last year changed his walk-up song to Lifestyle by Young Thug and Rich Homie Quan. R.I.P. Rich Homie. We're not forgetting you, brother. He had Lifestyle, and that was a dirtbag type of song for sure. Yeah, let's see. And then Peyton, our guy from Blue Ember, says, I've seen some mocks of Wiggins being drafted by the Cards with one of those comp picks they picked up from Seattle and Tampa. Yeah, we were talking about this on the show yesterday, that like the St. Louis Cardinals just don't draft a ton of actual Razorbacks. They usually draft like high school kids that are committed or just guys from the area or whatever, but we really don't see them as drafting a ton of Razorbacks. They're just not super into it. We thought they might draft Hagen a few years ago, but I guess he didn't quite fall to them. Yeah, we'd love to see that. I mean, of course I'd love to see Wiggins just come back to Arkansas next year. But I've seen him anywhere from like 60 to 120 in those prospect boards and big boards. We'll see where he ends up. But yeah, if he ends up kind of in that range, I think Arkansas would have a chance to get him back, but I'm a little bit worried that he's going to end up signing for a lot more than wherever his draft status ends up being. All right. Getting through a few more of these. Again, appreciate everybody for doing this, man. For everybody for popping in. I know we got a lot of our usual names. Let's see. Big Donnelly wants to know, how do we match up against TCU? If you already discussed, I apologize. Yeah, didn't really talk about TCU much at all. TCU is interesting. I mean, they're, Arkansas pretty much every year Arkansas plays TCU in Globe Life. Like, it's a good team. It's usually a pretty close game, except for that one year where TCU really got after it against Arkansas. TCU is another team that, just similar to Oklahoma State, a lot of big physical guys. Their outfield is loaded. I mean, they got a kid, Sawyer Stroh-Snyder, who's a top, 30 to 35 prospect in the draft, hit 350 last year, 6'2", 200 outfielder. Got another one, Chase Brunson, also a potential first-round pick, hit 313 last year with 12 home runs, 6'3", 200. They have Noah Franco, who is a two-way guy, pitched a little bit for them last year, but really was like their first base DH-man type of guy. Big, 6'4", 6'5", future first or second round pick. He's going to be one of the top prospects in next year's class. And I believe his little brother, I forget his name. The older one is Noah Franco. The younger one's name is escaping me, but I think he might be starting for them at shortstop, and he's one of the top prospects in his class as well. So with TCU, like, they are very good just on paper. Particularly their lineup is just loaded. They've also got a former Razorback, by the way, in Lance Davis, who's also a pretty intriguing prospect. 6'4", 210. They're pretty solid. Weirdly enough, with TCU, usually when I think of TCU, I kind of think arms. I feel like TCU's lineup is kind of their headliner this year. Like a lot of their top prospects are in the lineup, which is very interesting to me. I think Arkansas matches up well with anybody, though. You know what I mean? Like, I think Arkansas has the arms to kind of hold any lineup in check, and I also think they have the type of lineup that can give any of these guys some danger. And I think for Arkansas, it really helps that none of these three teams, including TCU, will have faced none of these three lineups will have been facing high-level arms the way that Arkansas's lineup for the last 5 months has been facing really high-level competition with their own pitching staff. And so I think that helps Arkansas in week 1 of a season like this. Lane wants to know, why are people so down on Arkansas this year? He said he's seen some people projecting them as a 14 seed in the postseason and finish 8th in the SEC. Yeah, I saw Baseball America had their first what's it called? Field of 64 projection. How Arkansas is the number 14 overall seed. I mean, listen, if you're the number 14 overall seed, you still won a ton of SEC games. You're still a good team. You still have a chance to make a run. I think that would mean that Arkansas would go like 17-13 or worse with their schedule. And I'm not saying they can't. Injuries can happen. Some of these teams can end up being way better. With the way the schedule plays out and the way you get your 3 toughest series all at home, I have a hard time not seeing Arkansas winning north of 18 SEC games the way that they do every single year. If I were putting a record prediction on Arkansas, I'd probably go more in the 21-22 win range, which would have them as a national seed. But to answer your question of why are people so down on Arkansas this year, so I think it's one of two things. One, I think there's a lot of people who know that Arkansas is going to be good, but don't necessarily take them seriously as a threat to win it all for obvious reasons, because they never wind up getting over the hump. They never wind up, getting on that mountaintop. I also think there's a lot of people nationally who just look at last year's lineup and how effective it was and how they pretty much hit on every guy, and they think there's no way Arkansas can do that again. And, we're maybe not quite as confident in the pitching staff. And so if we think they take a small step back in the lineup and a small step back on the mound, that would probably equate to about a 14 seed, maybe being closer to that 6 to 8 range in the SEC. But I'm with you. It does kind of seem crazy because even when Arkansas sucks in the postseason, they still win 20 SEC games usually. So yeah, I do think that's interesting. Papa Dragon says, if he continues on his upward trajectory, I would like Dan Skirka from Murray State. I think DVH has enough years that we would see him at a bigger job before we would need to worry about it. Yeah, that's possible. Obviously, Murray State went on a crazy run last year, and so I would imagine Skirka is probably a name that's kind of circulating and is going to be on a lot of those radars. Where is the guy from ECU, Cliff Godwin? Is he still at ECU, Cliff Godwin? Because he's another one that I feel like is just like, and I feel like, let me Google this before I say something stupid here. Where is Cliff Godwin? He's still at ECU, which, maybe he's just going to die there. Maybe that's just what he wants to do forever. That would be another one where I'm like, I would want to make that guy say no. Make sure that he doesn't want to kind of take that next step. And now Cliff Godwin maybe is not the guy, because if you're a Razorback fan, you're thinking a guy who always is good in the regular season that doesn't take his team to Omaha. But I think I would be going to Cliff Godwin and being like, hey, you're one of the best coaches in the country. You haven't had the talent to get you there, and you haven't been able to retain the talent that you do keep. Hell, we even stole your Friday night starter in Zach Root. Would you like to come to Arkansas and maybe get those resources, get that opportunity to bring in some elite talent? He'd be one that I'd have on my radar. But yeah, I was pretty impressed with Murray State. Arkansas played them, I guess that would have been 2 years ago, and they played Murray State like almost a decade ago too. Murray State's a pretty solid program. That's pretty good year in and year out. Obviously had a great run last year. Yeah, I definitely am not gonna put up too much of a fight over Skirka being in that mix for Arkansas. Let's see. Ryan wants to know, this is a great question. He says, is Helfrich's replacement on the roster or from the portal? So Carter Rutenbar is Arkansas's freshman catcher in this class right now. I think he is a guy that is very interesting to me. He's more of a hitter at this stage of his career. Maybe not a guy that you would be super confident in having behind the plate, catching and handling a staff, all those things. But I think the bat is really solid. Not many left-handed hitting catchers out there in the country, so he's another guy that Joe Doyle is very high on, thinks he's got a chance to be a legit prospect. Everybody loves the bat with him. And we know Bobby Wernis makes good progress with all these catchers. I mean, think about literally every catcher in the last decade at Arkansas. Grant Cook got night and day better throughout his career. Casey Opitz got night and day better throughout his career, became one of the best we had seen by the time he left. Michael Turner had barely even caught a full season when he came to Arkansas. He was pretty damn good in his 1 year. Even Parker Rowland, who when he first got to Arkansas, and, Parker Rowland, of course, no disrespect, shouldn't have been starting, but like even he wound up being a pretty solid defensive catcher, which is crazy because when they recruited him, they thought he was a good hitter that sucked behind the plate. And he wound up being a pretty solid catcher. Helfrich was a guy. Y'all remember when Helfrich first started catching and people were like, God, this guy sucks. He can't throw. He can't block. He can't do anything. And now Ryder Helfrich's going to be the number one catcher in the draft, and he's going to get drafted highly because of how good he is as a defender. So I no matter who they go with, I think there's a lot of development that can be had there. And so I think for someone like Rutenbar, what kind of strides is he able to take this offseason? That will give him a good chance. But I'm going to go with a crazy one for you here, Ryan. I think he might be in the freshman class that just signed. Javorsky Lane is a guy, very athletic, very mature for his age. It's hard to say that a freshman is going to come in as a 18-year-old and be a legitimate catcher in the SEC. If there were one that could do it, Javorsky Lane would be that guy. Don't rule him out as coming into Arkansas and playing right away as a true freshman. If he makes it to campus, by the way, he's a guy that very well could wind up signing professionally. But I think the safe bet, though, would probably be from the portal. What I think they might end up doing, if they get Lane to campus, which would be huge, I think what they might do is kind of say, hey, this guy could probably help us and could be our catcher of the future, but let's go ahead and bring in a guy who's at least started some games, similar to what they did with Hudson White and Ryder Helfrich a couple years ago. I think that could be the way they go. So I'll probably go from the portal, but don't sleep on Carter Rutenbar and don't sleep on Javorsky Lane coming out of the high school ranks, man. Let's see. I guess we've pretty much made it through the chat here, man. Again, really appreciate everybody for doing this. We've gone, just under an hour and a half, man. Love that. I'm gonna try and tackle this last question here from Ryan, where he says, "Is baseball the sport where coaches matter most or least?" So this is a very interesting question because it's like, one, like, who the hell knows? It's you never know because every player is different. Some players really need constant instruction. They need to be constantly uplifted. They need all this. I think most of the work that baseball coaches do, you don't see in the middle of games. Whereas a basketball coach is constantly, calling plays and saying, hey, let's run this sideline out of bounds play. He's looking at what's happening on the field and having to make adjustments, having to make constant calls, having to call timeouts, having to tell his players what to do and stuff like that. And obviously football coaches, I mean, you're literally calling every play, you know what I mean? And so I think coaching obviously matters a ton in football, a ton in basketball. In terms of game day, coaching matters probably like by far the least in baseball, I would say. I mean, hell, we've seen Dave Van Horn literally miss games and it not be a big deal at all. And obviously we trust Matt Hobbs and all that, but it's like, yeah, on game day, there's really not much you have to do as a coach. In fact, and you know this, Ryan, because you're a ball knower, but like most baseball coaches have the philosophy of like, if I see a hitter doing something I don't like at the plate, I'm not going to tell him about it mid-game because you don't want these guys going up to the plate thinking about mechanics and thinking about whatever. You do that stuff during practice. You do that stuff in the offseason. You do that stuff during BP that day. You don't want these guys in the middle of the game making huge adjustments and trying to coach your way through it. Like, it's not really something that happens, but I do think like, I think coaching still obviously matters in baseball, but that does crack me up every year when Arkansas finally loses, whether it's in the regional, super regional, or Omaha, and people say, well, Dave Van Horn choked again. And I'm like, what did Dave Van Horn do? He put Cole Gibbler in the game in a 2-run game or whatever it was. And, counted on him to get those outs. That was his bad decision. Did he not coach Charles Davalon correctly on how to play left field? He didn't make any errors the entire season. But now all of a sudden DVH is a bad coach. Did he have the wrong first baseman in there for Reese Robinette when he made that error? Did he have the wrong shortstop in there for Vahiva Aloy? Like, it's kind of crazy that DVH has to kind of wear this, but he has like pretty much no say in a lot of the big moments that have defined his career and defined his legacy. And so, yeah, it is a very interesting thing, but that was a good question there. There's a few more that I actually a couple more that I'm going to answer before I get out of here. Because Ben, I mentioned at the top that I might do my 5 most underrated players. I'm just going to instead answer this from Ben. He says, of the pitchers, who do you think isn't getting talked about enough? And this is a great question because I've been wanting to say this for a while. Cooper Dossett is way up there on this list. And we've talked about him a good bit on the show. I think a lot of people who have been really paying attention have been noticing, hey, he's kind of solidified a very big role for this team. I think if Friday night's game is 3-2 entering the 9th inning and Arkansas has a lead, Cooper Dossett's going to be on the mound. I feel pretty confident in predicting that for you. The only way I could see it not being that way is if maybe Cole Gibbler came in the 7th inning and he's thrown 2 innings and he's like struck out the side in both and he's just got it rolling. Maybe they'll just let him roll. But like, I think Cooper Dossett is pretty much your closer going into the year. And Gibbler's also, of course, high leverage reliever, going to close some games, as important as anybody, and going to end up having more workload for sure. But like, Cooper Dossett is killing it. He's throwing the ball 98. He is a stud. And I think people remember him from a couple years ago and probably remember, oh yeah, that guy's pretty good. But like at the time he got hurt in 2024, he wasn't like a massive part of the pitching staff. And so I think in that moment, if I had told you, hey, when he does make his return in 2 years, he's going to be the closer, that probably would have sounded a little bit outlandish, but he's looked awesome. He's throwing the ball really hard. So I think Cooper Dossett is certainly one of those guys that jumps into mind. Tate McGuire is another one that I think is just, I don't know if underrated is the right term, but like he's been awesome this offseason. He had a great summer in the Cape, threw the ball really well in the fall, so well that like he was in this starting rotation mix going into the preseason. And that seems to have kind of died down a little bit, but he's thrown the ball really well, threw well against the starting lineup just a couple days ago. I think Tate McGuire is, whatever role he's going to end up in for Arkansas, he's like overqualified for it. He's got a lot of experience, throws a ton of strikes, really above average command, well above average command for Tate McGuire. This stuff doesn't really blow you away, more like 91 and 94, every now and then with the stuff. He has thrown harder before, so maybe there's another little velo jump in there. But Tate McGuire, I think, is doing a great job. And I'll tell you the last one, and this is an important one. Ethan McElvain, Vanderbilt transfer. He was Arkansas's first transfer commit, and I think that kind of flew under the radar because he committed to Arkansas while we were in Omaha. In fact, I remember exactly where I was standing. I had just left the stadium and was going over to find John and Curtis at some local establishment, and I saw on my phone that Ethan McElvain committed, and I remember thinking, why did he commit right now? Like, what a weird thing to do. Like, you're one of the top prospects in the portal. Why'd you commit while we're in the middle of the College World Series? Whatever. He decided to do that. That's all fine and dandy. So I think his commitment kind of flew under the radar. He was a top 10 overall player in the portal. Now, how do they make those rankings? I don't know, because you look at his numbers at Vanderbilt, not great last year. He was pretty good as a freshman, did not really take that step forward as a sophomore. I think Ethan McElvain's a dude that is going to get drafted this year because he's got dynamic stuff, can throw 96, 98 from the left side. He's like 6'5", 230. Like, he's just an absolute house up there on the mound. I think Ethan McElvain is a guy that we haven't talked about a ton, and he hasn't been like amazing in scrimmages. He threw pretty well the other day. Word on the street is that in the scrimmages behind closed doors, that's when him and James DeCramer started to really emerge a little bit, and James DeCramer struck out the side the other day. Ethan McElvain struck out 2 in his inning of work. Like, both of those guys look good. I think they are about to throw the ball really well this season, and so I think I could see Ethan McElvain being the guy that maybe throws 1 inning this weekend and looks awesome, and people are going to be like oohing and ahhing and being like, I haven't heard anything about this guy. Well, now you can say, I've heard a little bit about this guy. So talk about Ethan McElvain a little bit. I think he's a stud. Real quick, Lazy Turtle says, can we get an episode for stat leader predictions in batting average, home runs, and strikeouts? Yeah, that's what I'm going to do tomorrow. That's what I'll do tomorrow. I will, because someone asked about the bowl predictions earlier. I probably should have done something like that. Tomorrow's episode will just be an official, like, season predictions type of thing. I'll predict Arkansas's SEC record. I'll predict the team leader in batting average, home runs, pitching strikeouts, pitching wins, pitching whatever, ERA, saves. I'll do all that tomorrow. I think that's what tomorrow's episode will be. So I'm looking forward to that. Anderson says, who do you believe will be the first guys off the bench this year in the lineup aside from Christian Turner? Carson Willis has been looking good this spring. Carson Willis has been looking good this spring. That is a very sound take. He's looked awesome, and him and Tyler Holland both, I feel like, you want to talk about people we don't talk about enough. Both of those guys have just been really good in these scrimmages and just really competitive, and kind of makes you take a step back and be like, damn, this program is really talented. They're like, these guys don't even really have a chance to get on the field. And I don't say that to be mean. I just mean, like, realistically, like, they're not really pushing to be in the starting lineup. And you see them out there hitting against Gabe Gackle. You see them hitting against Steele Leaves. You see them hitting against, like, real top guys on the team, like mid-90s stuff. And, like, they just have no problem. They fit right in. If you had no context and just went to those scrimmages, you'd be like, oh, what is this guy, like an all-SEC type of guy? Is he going to hit fifth this year? Like, there's a lot of really good baseball players on this team that aren't going to get a ton of opportunities to showcase that. But, you mentioned aside from Christian Turner, I come back to Zach Stewart where, when he first committed, I think a lot of people looked at his stats and some maybe thought, okay, this might be a starting outfielder. And then you kind of look closer and you say, okay, he was good as a sophomore, but then he kind of dipped off as a junior. There's a lot of strikeout there. Is that going to translate to the SEC? And I think that's an appropriate way to view it. But I think Zach Stewart has almost gone all the way the other way, where now he's become underrated. Because I think you can look at, he hit 21 home runs as a sophomore. So if you look at that and he hit 300 or whatever, he was like a legitimate, guy that might have gotten drafted. He turned down some money, in fact. So you look at that, and that can lead you to maybe overrate him and think, oh, this is like a huge game changer that's going to hit in the middle of the lineup. He's definitely not that, but he's not some bum, you know what I mean? That's not going to play and not going to help at all. I think Zach Stewart's a pretty good player, and I think he's a guy that, frankly, has a chance to play at the next level, and he might not even be in the top 10 of this lineup, which just tells you a little bit about what we got going on. Robert says, can Aloy hit the slider? So this is a common misconception, because if you go back, and I've been doing this thing where I go back and watch all the Stu Hogg highlights from last year. Kahio Aloy not only hit breaking balls last year, he hit them like fairly consistently, and he hit a lot of them. A lot of his best hits and his best home runs and his best doubles of the year last year were against breaking balls, but the ones that he hit were in the zone. And that's the key for Kahio Aloy, is identifying, hey, this is a hanger that I can do some damage against, versus, hey, this is one that's like going to go right off the plate and I have no chance of hitting. He's got to be able to identify the difference between those two. He's very aggressive at the plate. He swings and misses a lot. It's not that he can't hit a slider. In fact, when he swings and misses, it's very rarely at a breaking ball in the zone. And I'm sure you can probably find a clip or an example and say, oh, here's one that was a hanging breaking ball that he missed. Sure, but I think for the most part, whether it's a fastball, a changeup, slider, splitter, sinker, screwball, whatever, if it's in the zone, Kahio Aloy can hit it, and he will hit it. The key is getting him to take some of those pitches out of the zone, because that's been his little bit of an issue. And it's like, I know it's kind of a common thing here, and I think sometimes people see these pitches. You see someone swing at a slider down and away, and you're like, how did he swing at that? It's like, well, you're geared up for 96. So you see that ball starting at the edge of the plate, and you're like, oh, crap, I've got to protect the plate here. Oh, no, it's out of the zone. Here we are. I think that's kind of the issue there. But in terms of can he hit a slider, yes. I mean, he hit 13 home runs last year. I would venture to say 6 of them came against breaking balls. That's not a guaranteed thing. I'd have to go back and really, but like I literally just today was watching a video of, they played a UAPB, and he hit a ball like 465 feet, and they had some dude that was just throwing up little meatball breaking balls that were like 70 miles an hour, just kind of lobbing them up in there. And Kahio hit them. Obviously, he's gonna have to hit much better stuff than that, but yeah, Kahio Aloy very much can hit a slider. All righty, guys. Well, I think that about does it for us here on today's edition of the Baumbastic Podcast. Again, cannot thank you guys enough for pulling up. I mean, middle of a work day. It's 3:30, 4:30 in the afternoon now. You guys are here tapping in, talking some baseball. Like I said, even if it's just 10 of you, we're going to have a good time. We're going to talk some baseball. Hopefully, as we get going throughout the year, we'll have more and more people, more and more audience on this, and we can have some more and more fun. And hopefully next week, we're going to do the same thing. Now, real quick, let me make sure I'm not talking out of my arse here because I think Arkansas basketball plays on Wednesday next week. Let's see. Yes, Arkansas basketball plays Wednesday at 6 p.m. So next week's edition of this is going to be Tuesday, which will be the day after they play Tarleton in Arlington. So count on that. Tuesday, 3 p.m. next week. That's when we will be doing another edition of this, Calling All Casuals. And again, appreciate everybody for tuning in because I know a lot of you guys are not casuals. A lot of you guys are diehards. And I appreciate you regardless of your level of interest in Arkansas baseball. Appreciate you supporting me, supporting the team, supporting the program, all of the above. So y'all have a good one, and we will catch you tomorrow on Inside Arkansas Live. Appreciate you guys for tuning in.